Hi folks, we have just released Isograph version 0.5.0 and it is chock full of some amazing developer experience wins. But I thought this would be a good opportunity to just take a step back and holistically describe the developer experience of using Isograph. And I hope by the end of this that you'll agree that it is absolutely top notch. Okay, so let's talk about how Isograph works. With Isograph, you build your app out of these small units called client fields. They can depend on each other, but they're basically some functions from some graph data to an arbitrary value. So in this case, we're declaring this query.homepage client field, and it depends on the header and the homepage list, and it returns some arbitrary value, in this case a React component. Now, there's also a compiler that's running. Basically, every time we've made a change, it's kind of done its work in about 100 milliseconds. We can improve upon that, but it's certainly better than it used to be, and honestly pretty fast. And this compiler will generate a bunch of files, and these files do all sorts of things. One of those things is they include types. So for example, the type of this data parameter is described in a generated file, and that's how when we hover on this, we'll see that we select header and homepage list. So that's kind of nice. And then if we start selecting type name and then you hover on data, well, TypeScript will very quickly also see that there's been a change, and it sees that now data has a type name field on it. Okay, so another of these files that is generated is the query text. So in particular, this is the query text for everything that's reachable from the homepage. And if we, for example, select the viewer, and on the viewer select the bio, well, there's no bio here. But if I do that, well, you'll see that we now start including the bio. And if we remove the bio, well, it goes away from the query. So that's great. That means that with Isograph, you have this guarantee of performance that, like, for any given page, you're selecting exactly the fields that are needed, no more and no less. And in addition to that, I mean, that's great, because if you have 50 developers touching the same code base, it's really hard to know what to do if you stop selecting a field. Can you go to the query declaration and stop including it there? Maybe, but you have to do a bunch of research. And the compiler, that's the one that does the research for you. Just traverses everything and selects all the fields that are needed, and no more and no less. Okay. So another thing that's we generate is this resolver reader here. So in particular, there's this data structure that we use at runtime to actually build out this data parameter right here. And this data parameter will contain exactly the fields that you asked for, no more and no less. And in particular, it doesn't contain the entirety of the network response. It doesn't contain the entirety of whatever's on the query object in our local store. It doesn't contain whatever its neighbors asked for. It contains exactly the fields that it specifically asked for. So that's great. That means that if you make a change to one component, it won't affect the runtime behavior of a different component. And that's what gives apps built with Isograph a level of unparalleled stability. Okay, so that's sort of enough about how the compiler actually works. Let's talk about the language server, the extension. So we have an extension installed, the Isograph extension. It's available in the VSCode extension marketplace. There's also an open v6 version of this, so it should work with other editors as well. Now, one thing you might have noticed is that, well, we have this backtick here, so everything here is a string, and yet there's actually nice syntax highlighting going on in here. That's all provided by the language server. And another thing the language server provides is if you just auto formatting on save, it'll make it nice and pretty for you. Now, if you hover on a field, we'll get some nice hover information. And we can also, for example, go to definition. Now, okay, that hover information wasn't very useful. It just told us about query and told us the name is homepage list. So maybe let's say something a little more descriptive. Say homepage list, a list of things. Okay, that's helpful. Now, even before I saved it, we can hover on homepage list, and we see that the description is present there. That's kind of awesome. That's because the VS Code extension has sort of an understanding of all the files that are currently open. So you don't have to save to get the latest and greatest. It just kind of works with whatever is in the buffer. Okay, So let's go ahead and close this and get rid of it. Now, let's talk for a little bit about what it's like to actually build with Isograph. Now, from here on out, we're going to start talking about new things that are in version 0.5.0. So the first thing you might want to do when you build a new component is you'll declare it, and then you'll start selecting things that are new. So you might need on the home page, you might need a header, a body, and a footer, and they don't exist. So you write them. Okay, so header's already taken, so we'll write header 2. Oh, there's a nice little red squiggly indicating that this doesn't actually exist. And there's a pretty helpful message right here. Now, one of the things you can do is we have these auto fixes. So you can click on this, and you see that one of the suggestions is create new component field named query.header2. So let's go ahead and do that. Nice. Now this file is there. The error message has gone away, and we can jump to definition instantly. And now, well, what do we do here? Well, we need to start selecting some fields, right? And one thing we might want to do is we'll select viewer. Okay, so we'll select viewer, and then what do we want to do on viewer? We want, we want to select the avatar. That's nice. There's autocomplete here. And now we can go ahead and directly use these fields. So maybe we have a React fragment, so we can say this is a header. This is very important information because you wouldn't know that it's a header otherwise. And then you just start selecting data.viewer.avatar. Awesome. That just works. Now if we go back to home route, we'll see that there's a type error because header doesn't exist, but header 2 does. So let's go ahead and change this to header 2. And now there's another type error. We didn't ask for any parameters, but route and set route were passing them. So we can either remove them, or we can do this. We can talk about how we add component props. So we do that by adding a second parameter here. And so here we're going to ask for route and set route, and then we'll give them a type. Route, let's just say they're any, and then set route is any. You really should provide actual types, but this is good enough for now. And now, if we go back here, well, that type error has gone away. So why is this a second parameter? Why isn't it part of that first parameter? Well, the thing is, the parameter for the type for this is provided by the framework, and the type for this is provided by you. So we're actually okay with it looking a little bit unorthodox because the developer experience of typing that second parameter is just so much better if it's its own thing. If if TypeScript gave us better ways to type a sort of combination object, that would be fine too, but for now it doesn't. So this is the best developer experience way of being able to provide all of the type safety that you sort of need. Okay, so another thing you might have noticed is that we didn't actually pass any data down to that avatar, and yet that avatar here, it needs the name and the URL. So where's that data coming from? Well, actually, the way Isograph works is the framework is providing all this data to that subcomponent. You just get essentially the result of calling this function, which is to say a React component containing that. And you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. No importing of the header yourself, no passing any data down, no worrying about passing data to a different component, no what even are fragment references, no worries about reading data, all this kind of stuff that you've worried about in the past, prop drilling, it's all gone. You just ask for what you need, and the Isograph and the framework will connect it all for you. So let's see what we've accomplished. We can go back to this page here. Now we don't really like hot module reloading, so we have to actually refresh ourselves. And look, right there, this is a header and the avatar. It all just works. So yeah, that's a bit about the developer experience of using Isograph. Isograph, I think, has some top-notch developer experience, and I can't wait to see the kind of things that you build with it. But next up, we're going to start talking about the runtime features. But for that, I'm going to have to see you at the next video. All right, cheers.